Chapter 19. If Nick thought he was going to have time to mull over the matter with Laney and Vincent, he was mistaken. Entering the town limits of Callahan, he pulled over 2 speeding drivers and answered a call regarding some teens creating a disturbance at Harry's convenience store. Nick brought back some lunch for him and Howard. With Myra out on vacation for a few days, Nick was responsible for getting his own food again. However, Myra promised that once she returned, she would be bringing in more Italian casserole and cheesy bread with her. But for now, Nick had to settle for the sandwich and chips from Sub and Munch. The door opened as Michelin walked in. She passed him a discreet smile to refrain from revealing to Howard that there was something romantic going on between them. "How'd it go with Laney this morning?" she asked, sitting down at her desk.
"She didn't believe a word of it. Now she hates me."
"Ouch. So, what's her next step?"
"I've got Howard's arraignment this afternoon."
"I can't believe the judge allowed him to stay in your custody for this long."
"Howard didn't have any place else to go, so I worked out a deal with the judge for him to stay here. The deal was, I provide him with protection. In return, he gives me information to help bring in the guys he works for. But this arrangement was only good for 2 weeks."
"So, where's he going now?"
"After Sylvie pays his bail, he's going back to Guinness until his trial with time served."
"I see," Michelin said quietly, unable to think of anything else to say on the subject.
"Before I forget, my daughter's 7th birthday is Saturday. I was wondering if you'd like to come. It's going to be a small gathering with a few of her friends and our family at my parents' home. It'd really mean a lot if you could be there."
"Well, she did invite me."
"Yes, she did."
"Then I'll be there." Michelin smiled. The phone rang.
"Just a second,"
Nick said, grabbing up the handset.
"This is Sheriff Moran."
"Sheriff Moran," Brett said on the other end.
"What can I do for you?"
Nick asked, swallowing all the other words he wanted to say at the moment.
"Just a heads up. I'm going to stop by your office tomorrow, take a closer look at the evidence you've gathered. Tomorrow's not really a good day for me. This isn't going away, Sheriff. I suggest you clear your schedule so we can wrap this case up to the government's satisfaction. How's tomorrow at 1? That sounds fine. Was there anything else?"
The muscle tightened in Nick's jaw.
"No, that'll do it. See you tomorrow."
Brett said, hanging up, as did Nick. "What was that all about?"
"I have a meeting with Brett tomorrow."
Michelin returned an apologetic smile as Nick sighed heavily. As promised, the following afternoon, Nick sat at his desk watching Brett go over the files he had gotten from Michelin regarding the case. Occasionally, Brett would sigh heavily as he read while Nick looked on in boredom, waiting for him to get to the part where he actually needed him. So far, it had been a complete waste of a perfectly good afternoon, sitting there waiting for Brett to finish reviewing the evidence that he could have done on his own time. The whole process dragged on for hours with Nick listening to Brett's sighs of frustration, the clearing of his throat, and the second hand ticking around the clock. Nick's cell phone rang. Brett looked annoyed by the interruption, where Nick looked relieved.
"Excuse me, I've got to take this."
Nick said, hoping for some excuse to cut their meeting short.
"Hello, this is Nick."
"Hi," Michelin said softly. "I was just calling to see how you were doing." For once, Nick wished it wasn't Michelin, especially when he knew she was the reason Brett was attacking him in the first place. "Is Brett still there?"
"Yes, but I should be finished here in about the next 20 minutes.
Nick sat looking at Brett, who frowned with a shake of his head before returning to his work.
"Scratch that. Seems it's going to be a little longer."
"Is everything okay?"
"Everything's fine. I'll talk to you later."
"I love you."
"I love you too. Goodbye."
Nick said, hanging up.
"Hey, who knew there was so much information here to uncover?"
Brett said, closing the file, making himself comfortable in his chair.
"Now, according to your rather vague notes, which if I didn't know better I'd say you threw them together this morning, you and Agent Stone have several suspects who you have not apprehended. Why is that?" "We have reason to believe that these suspects can and will lead us to more evidence." "Why wasn't that course of action taken when your investigation initially began?" "Initially, Agent Stone and I were working separately. As for her investigation, I assume she was following the course of action based on her training with Sid. So at what point did the two of you decide to work together?" "When Agent Stone and I discovered that similar pieces of evidence had been found." "The fact that Shirley Berta, a key suspect with a history of said criminal activity, has fled and has not been apprehended as of yet, is not only making our department appear inept, but yours as well. What measures are you prepared to take to bring her in?" As I said before, I'm working in conjunction with other county sheriffs in Texas as well as across the United States to find her and make an arrest. Sheriff Moran, I don't know how you handle cases down here, but in D.C., we take our leads seriously. Is that right?
Nick fired back.
Then how is it that someone with a criminal history such as Sherilyn Burda contacts your department and you didn't think to check her as a suspect first?
Nick said, refusing to go into the altered file that Michelin mentioned.
Whoa, wait a minute.
Brett said, raising his hands in protest.
Are you suggesting that this is our fault? We wouldn't be in this predicament if you had cooperated with my department in the first place. Therefore, here's what we're going to do. I've arranged for a special task force to come in and make the arrest you are either too afraid or incapable of making. I have a court order that gives me full authority to seize all business ledgers, journals, and computers of every business and service here, starting with this office, first thing Monday morning. Anyone who does not comply would be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. You have a court order to come into my office and seize my computer? I'd like to see that order now.
Nick demanded. Brett slammed the court order on the desk. Nick reached down and picked it up. Just as he figured, the language was some legalese he needed a lawyer to help him understand.
Make no mistake, Sheriff. This is no ordinary counterfeiting ring. These people have managed to infiltrate the United States Treasury Department. They no longer want to play by this nation's rules. They are very committed to creating their own. Do you have any idea what havoc this is going to create? That being said, I will do whatever it takes to make sure they don't succeed. If that means I have to put this miserable excuse of a town on lockdown, then so be it. I'll see you on Monday,
Brett said, picking up his briefcase and storming out. As the days passed and Saturday neared, Nick did what he had done since his meeting with Brett, throw himself into preparing for Allie's birthday party. Seeing the excitement on Allie's face with just the mention of Saturday's festivities was just the outlet Nick needed. It did his heart good to know that somewhere he was doing something right. Sure, Nick tried to stand his ground with Brett, but in the end he was alone. Fisk couldn't help him. Michelin had her own problems with Brett, and Howard was no longer in Callahan. Neither Nick nor Fisk had arrested Jacob Larson, Sherilyn Burda, or Ryan Hollis. Nick had been kicking himself ever since for letting Jacob and Ryan go when he had them in the palm of his hands after that fake bomb search at the school. Now he couldn't pay someone to find them. Nick arrived at his parents' with the birthday girl and Michelin promptly at 2 o'clock, as the invitations had stated. Michelin sat in the front seat, turned facing the child on the drive over, smiling and nodding at the appropriate times and asking Allie questions regarding her party whenever the opportunity presented itself. Nick couldn't help but love Michelin even more for showing his daughter such care and attention. His car had barely pulled to a stop when Allie unbuckled herself, jumped out of the car, and ran to greet the children she had invited from her school. They were all just as eager to see Allie as well as ride Colby and Chester, the two colts, from the stables. Nick knew that his dad was keeping the other children at bay until his granddaughter, the birthday girl, had the chance to ride one of them first. "She's adorable," Michelin said as Nick entwined his fingers within hers.
Yeah, she is,
Nick said. Then he stopped and looked up at the house and then back at Michelin. "What is it?" she asked with an endearing tilt of her head.
I just wanted to say again how much I really appreciate your being here, for Allie and for me.
I wouldn't have missed it. I just hope she likes my gift.
I'm sure she will.
Any last-minute advice on what I should say if someone should ask why you brought that government woman to Allie's party? Michelin asked, making air quotes.
Just tell them that Allie invited you.
That sounds simple enough. Michelin beamed as they went inside. Brightly colored streamers and balloons hung about the living room, creating the perfect birthday party atmosphere. "Oh, Allie's going to love it," Michelin said, looking around, taking it all in.
You think so?
"Yeah, she is." Michelin smiled brightly. "There's Nicky." Minnie rushed over to greet him. Michelin found it amusing that his mother called him Nicky, as if he were still her little boy.
Hi, Ma. Everything looks great,
Nick said, wrapping his arms around her shoulders, giving her a hug and a kiss on her cheek. Minnie laughed, patting him on the shoulder. Pulling away, she saw Michelin standing patiently beside him. "Miss Stone, I'm so glad you could make it." The fullness of Minnie's face creased into a pleasant smile. "Thank you, Miss Moran. Please call me Michelin. That's a lovely name. Of course, dear." "Nick's right. Everything looks wonderful. Do you need any help with anything?" Michelin asked, wanting nothing more than to make herself useful. Well, I could use a little help in the kitchen, if that's all right with you, Nicky.
It's okay with me. I'll see you later.
Nick told Michelin as she followed Minnie into the kitchen. Streaks of screaming and laughter hung in the air as the children ran outside to play. The screen door hit against the wooden frame each time, competing with the chatter from the parents standing around in individual groups talking among themselves, while others trailed back and forth from the kitchen to the dining room carrying heaping serving trays of crispy chicken nuggets, seasoned potato wedges, buttered corn on the cob, and homemade biscuits. Nick walked over to the refreshment table. There he stood, admiring the birthday cake covered with pink and yellow sprinkles and matching frosted balloons surrounded by stacks of neatly wrapped gifts. Among them were gifts from him and Chase, along with a gift from Michelin. Nick couldn't help but wonder when she had the time to buy a gift with everything else going on in her life. "Hi, Nick." He turned around. There stood Lainey with a forced smile, trying to hide whatever true feeling she had for him at the moment, for the sake of Allie's party.
Lainey, it's good to see you.
Nick said. Lainey stepped over and placed her gift on the table with the others. I couldn't miss Allie's big day.
She'll be happy you came.
Ma did a great job with everything.
Yeah, she did.
I'm sorry that I got so defensive the other day. I hope you aren't angry with me.
Not at all.
I know that you would never do anything to hurt me. You've always looked out for my best interests.
That's what big brothers are for. At least that's what I've been told.
Vincent's here.
Did the two of you talk?
I had to find out for myself.
And did you?
Nick asked, seeing Vincent step into the house. We're getting married. I wish you could just accept that and be happy for me.
This has nothing to do with you.
Nick said in a tone loud enough for her ears only. Before Lainey had the chance to respond, Vincent walked over to them.
Nick, it's good to see you.
Vincent said, shaking Nick's hand, with his eyes fixed knowingly upon him.
Same here.
Vincent turned to his fiancée.
Lainey, will you give us a minute?
Sure. Lainey said, excusing herself from their company. Vincent waited until she left before turning back to Nick.
Do you mind if we have a word outside? Let's go.
Nick said, leading Vincent down to the wooden post where they could talk in private. Once they were alone, Nick turned to Vincent.
I'm listening.
Nick said, giving Vincent his undivided attention.
Lainey said you're trying to connect me with the case you're working. Why would you do that? If you're involved, she has the right to know. Or maybe I should just arrest you right here and now. I don't think you want to do that, any more than you want to arrest Ryan Hollis at school the other day. Who told you about that? He did. Why are you telling me this? Because you're getting yourself in too deep, Nick. You need to back off. When did you talk to Ryan? Yesterday. It seems you took a package that doesn't belong to you. Do you mind telling me where it is? I don't have it. Who does? I don't know. And if I did, I wouldn't be standing here telling you about it. Fair enough. So would you prefer talking to Brett Auger about it? How do you know Brett? Let's just say we've had our share of run-ins. So, this run about you being a cop is just that. If you want to know the truth, Regal's a cop. I'm not. I'm confused as to how you've convinced my sister to continue this so-called engagement. Lainey knows how much I love her. It's as simple as that. Well, I've tried talking some sense into her, but obviously that didn't work, so here's the deal. If she gets hurt because of you, or this Nick, nothing's going to happen to your sister. I know what I'm doing. You just have to trust me. Give me a reason why I would do that. Here's one. I want Rico or Jayla just as much as you do. You lost me. I'm Secret Service, Nick. I've been working this case for the past 3 years. You're lying, just like you lied about being a cop. But humor me. How is it that you're able to convince these people that you're Vincent Hebert when Rico works at the precinct and already knows what Vincent looks like? Rico doesn't think I'm a cop. As far as he knows, I'm an investor. I just used Hebert's profile to gain access into the department's files. I needed to get inside information, but so far all I got was a bunch of nothing. There were charges filed against Rico, but from what I heard, his records were clean, as if someone had deleted them. With no one willing to come forward, we couldn't make any of it stick. I'm confused. Lainey said you came to her dorm to investigate a burglary. If you're not a cop, how were you able to do that? The head of my department set it up with the NYPD, so I could use the same name as the officer already on the force. The only difference is, one of us doesn't have a middle name. That's why when you put in Vincent Hebert, his picture came up. Had you typed in Vincent Alexander Hebert, one of our field agents' pictures would have come up, posing as me. The truth is, I've never stepped foot into the Midtown precinct, so there was no chance of me ever running into Rico. My job was to come to Texas and set up a scenario where I would gain access to the computer in the Stanley Police Department using Vincent Hebert's ID to keep track of Rico. We knew in advance that Rico was targeting Callahan. Stanley was as close as I could get. Who knew that I'd meet your sister and end up blowing my cover? Who is Vincent Coda? The cover I'm using with Rico and the others. Then your real name is? Classified, but I'm sure you understand. So you knew about this case when we first met. I didn't know until the day your family mentioned it during dinner. The fact that Laney suspects something weakens my chance to keep up with Ryan Hollis. I have to be careful that he doesn't find out Laney's your sister. The guy already has it out for you. He's just waiting for the word for Rico to take you out. Do yourself and your family a favor and stay out of it. I didn't mention anything about this case to Ryan, which is why I didn't arrest him. Ryan's paranoid. He thinks you're after him. I haven't gone near him. I can't even find him. Consider yourself lucky. You say you know Brett. What do you know about him? There is an open case pending further investigation which links Brett to suspicion of forging government checks and bonds. Really? Let's just say the chain of command at the Treasury Department has some sticky fingers on some levels, and Brett's hands aren't as clean as he'd like the department to think. So what do I do with this information? Nothing. What do you mean? I mean, walk away, Nick. This isn't going to end well for you or anybody you know. I'm not the one you have to worry about. Brett is coming to take over. And how does he plan to do that? He has a court order that gives him authority to do so. Don't worry about it. I'm sure Brett will step aside when I remind him he's still under investigation. He knows the risk involved if those allegations start to resurface. Are you saying it's a done deal? I stake my badge on it, but I need something from you in return. Name it. This being your county, you've made connections from the inside, connections I can't make without doing more damage to my cover. So you keep your ears open. Let me know what you find out. If I hear something, I'll do the same. Once we've exposed every part of Rico's organization, we take him down. Sooner the better.
Nick sat as Vincent nodded in agreement. Moments later, Nick and Michelin, along with the other guest, sang happy birthday to Allie. So, what was that all about? Michelin asked Nick discreetly, still looking straight ahead as Allie began cutting her cake.
What was what about?
Never mind, Michelin said sweetly. Nick knew she was referring to his and Vincent's talk outside. However, now wasn't a good time to discuss it. Allie spent the remainder of the afternoon opening up gift after gift as laughter and cheering filled the air.
Hello there, Nick.
George Moran stepped up with a cup of punch in his hand. He took a sip and frowned. Nick assumed it was too sweet and fruity for the old man's taste.
How have you been?
George asked, looking at his son with a keen eye.
I'm fine. How are you?
Nick asked, refusing to let his father's intimidating stare get to him the way it usually did.
I see you've let that situation with Chase get out of hand. What situation would that be? The whole town's talking about Chase asking that Carrie girl to marry him. I don't have to tell you the commotion that's creating. Where? At the barbershop? Scoff if you must. But had you or David asked a girl to marry you at that age, I would be thinking what the rest of the town is thinking. I don't know what the rest of the town is thinking. But I do know that today's Allie's day. She should have all your attention, not me. Fair enough. I'd be upset too if my son had become talk of the town. They're kids, Nick. Don't be afraid to lay down the law once in a while.
George said with a hearty slap against Nick's shoulder. Then he walked away. Had it not been for Allie, Nick would have chosen now to leave. George Moran was the last person he wanted to deal with, especially on top of everything else. That evening, Nick and Allie sat out on the front porch. The puffy white clouds hanging overhead meant that some weather was brewing. After the hot, humid days Callahan had seen, Nick wouldn't have minded an evening shower to cool things down a bit.
Did you enjoy your birthday, Ellie?
Yes. Daddy, don't you think Miss Stone is pretty?
I'm sure she is.
Nick said, trying to avoid any possibility of walking into a trap.
And she's really nice, too. I like her.
Allie decided thoughtfully.
Do you think someday she'll be my new mama?
Well, Allie, I really haven't thought about it.
But Daddy, she gave me the prettiest teacups so me and Elizabeth could have a tea party. You've just got to marry her.
Allie, teacups really aren't a good enough reason to ask someone to marry them.
I know. You have to love them too. And you do love her, don't you?
Allie.
Nick drew a blank as the words suddenly left him.
Maybe someday I'll think about marrying again, but for right now I've got my hands full with work and...
Us? I heard Grandpa tell Grandma that you needed help raising me and Chase.
He said that?
Is it true?
Do you think it's true?
Well, maybe if Chase wasn't always getting into trouble.
I'm your dad, and I'm here to handle any trouble the two of you get into. I don't care what anybody else thinks. We're doing just fine.
Yes, we are. But if you still wanted to marry Miss Stone, that would be okay too.
I'll keep that in mind.
Nick laughed, placing a kiss upon her forehead. Monday morning, Nick sat at the light, staring at the driver ahead of him. The fact that the driver kept looking at him through his rearview mirror caught his eye. What was he up to? Nick wondered, trying to decide if it was necessary to turn on his siren. Nick picked up his radio and called dispatch.
Emergency dispatch, go ahead.
I need you to run a search on a 2-door Ford Escort. Boyd County tags, license plate Tom Zebra Rabbit 640, over.
1 moment, please, Sheriff.
Nick watched the driver signal and turned the corner. Tailing closely behind, Nick followed.
That car is registered to Gerald Harris Winnett, over.
Does he have any priors?
That's a negative.
Thank you. Over and out.
He said, returning his radio to the holder. The driver pulled into the space in front of Dooley's Cafe. With the driver's hesitation to get out of the car, Nick was left with no other choice than to proceed to avoid causing a wreck. Obviously, Randy Hollis's paranoia was rubbing off on him. Entering the station, Myra greeted him with a grim look.
What is it?
Nick asked, nearing her desk.
Sheriff, I just got a call from Chase's school. Principal Grant needs to see you right away. He says there's an incident involving Chase.
Thanks, Myra.
Nick said, heading back out to the car. In all the time Nick had known Myra, he had never seen her at such a loss for words. Before this, Nick had been looking forward to her Italian casserole and cheesy breadsticks while hearing the update about her garden. Unfortunately, whatever needed his attention at the school had to take priority.